Welcome to the NFL Week 18 edition of the RotoWire Sports Gambling Podcast, presented, as always, by the great folks over at BetMGM. As has been the case for the last 4 months, please, if you're going to wager on the NFL this weekend or the weekend after or anytime during the playoffs, or really anytime ever throughout your entire life, make sure you're doing that over at BetMGM. You can go to the BetMGM app. You can go to betmgm.com and use our promo code BETROTO. That's BETROTO. Get that first wager risk-free up to $1,000. I am Nick Whalen, back with my main man, John McKechnie. John, I've had so much fun doing this pod with you all year. I cannot believe we are at week 18 already. We will be doing this throughout the playoffs. So, I don't want to make this seem like any sort of swan song, but wild that we are already in the final week of the regular season.
Yeah, it really did fly by. This is sort of like a signpost for my weeks always. It's like, okay, Thursday afternoon, like we're rocking this pod, and then all of a sudden football wall to wall for the rest of the weekend. And here we are. But yeah, I mean, we've done this pod from so many different locales. You from Colorado, me from my mom's basement. I mean, the list really goes on. It's been an impressive run with the fortitude that we've had to make it work every single week of the season and deliver middling betting advice. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, middling might be generous, to be honest. But we are coming in somewhat hot. We hit on the Jags, made that the split second decision best bet last week. I believe I was deciding between Jags -4 and Eagles -6.5.
Right.
So we dodged a significant bullet. Although pretty much every bet or parlay that I ended up tossing in last weekend involved the Eagles. So that was a bit of a negative development. But we'll get into the Eagles in a little bit. We got a few things we want to hit at the top of the show, and then we'll get into our usual format, talking about the lines going game by game. Of course, we need to start with Damar Hamlin, Buffalo Bills. And look, our mood is so much brighter now than it was a few days ago. We've been doing the XM show all week. You joined us on Tuesday. At that point, we still had really no definitive updates. We got a few, kind of reports here and there, but nothing definitive. And really in the last 24 to 36 hours, it's been all positive. And that's especially been the case today. We're recording this Thursday night. The update from the Bills on Hamlin this morning, they said he appears to have full neurological function, still working back in terms of his respiratory strength. But man, I mean, just amazing news all around. There's a report that he, was even able to ask about the result of the game, as if that matters at all. But really, really cool, really encouraging everything that's going on with Damar Hamlin. So, wanted to acknowledge that right away and kind of get your general thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, we talked, like you said, on Tuesday on the XM show, and yeah, I mean, it was dour. I mean, it was kind of radio silence other than what we received early Tuesday morning. That he was still with us, and it was kind of touch and go there as far as the information coming out, basically until Thursday afternoon. And all of a sudden, things are looking up. He's communicating, all these positive things. And it's such a huge relief because, what we saw Monday night, as we discussed, was one of the most jarring, if not the most jarring, live sporting event happenings of our lifetime, really. So, I mean, for him to be able to pull through like this is, it lifts everything. It makes you feel so much better because, I mean, that was about as dark as it gets.
Yeah, it really completely shifts the mood around the entire league. I wouldn't say it's going to be celebratory by any means this weekend, but you already see. I mean, there are a number of players who are reaching out about hey, can I get a Damar Hamlin jersey to wear during warmups, things like that. I think it's going to be a huge display of just kind of love and care for Damar Hamlin across the league this week. And I don't know how long he's going to remain in the ICU, remain hospitalized, but just so relieved and happy that things are moving in the right direction. And, we really have no choice but to look at this from a professional perspective, looking ahead to week 18. I didn't really have a huge issue with how the NFL handled this. I know some were critical about how long it took to end up suspending that game on Monday. I get that. I think given the weight of the situation, I do see it from both sides. NFL probably should have called the game earlier. I understand that, but that's all in the past. I do think, Damar Hamlin making so much progress and everything looking so bright right now, it makes this entire decision-making process for the NFL a little bit easier, or at least it takes some of the pressure off, because there are still some major decisions that have to be made. And as the time of recording here on Thursday, we're still not 100% sure what's going to happen with that Bills-Bengals game. I think the overwhelming belief at this point is that it will not be made up. I think that makes sense. That was kind of the general consensus for the last few days anyway. But now we're starting to hear some possible contingency plans as far as, how they handle seeding in the AFC specifically. I know there's been some suggestion that, they could go as far as to add a playoff team in each conference to kind of eliminate the advantage that is the number one seed. Obviously it would still be there, but of course you wouldn't get the first round bye. But there are a ton of moving parts when you look into this. And I think according to Albert Breer, who's always really clued in on things like this, his implication, at least as of Thursday afternoon, was that, we could see a situation where there might be a neutral site AFC title game, which would, again, kind of mitigate the potential effects of seeding if they don't play that don't play that Buffalo Cincinnati game. So to me, there's a lot to unpack here, but the implication overall, the more I've thought about this, is that if we're looking at this from a pure football perspective, the implication is that Buffalo, I think, is the team that would get screwed most if they play one fewer game, because they were in the driver's seat prior to week 17, heading into that Bengals game on Monday. If Buffalo won out and Kansas City won out, Buffalo would have been the one seed by virtue of beating Kansas City earlier this season. They would have finished with the same record. Of course, if you just throw that game out and you go by win percentage, they'll finish, assuming they both win in week 18, they would finish with the same number of losses, but Kansas City, by virtue of playing one more game, would win the tiebreak, I guess, in that situation by win percentage. So I think overall, if the league doesn't make up that game, they want to ensure that Buffalo is not losing out on essentially the opportunity to get that one seed.
Right. So, I mean, it's with everything that happened on Monday night, and now Buffalo kind of is oddly enough at the center of like the craziness that comes with this playoff situation, which, obviously very unprecedented. And like you said, there's been a lot of criticism of the league over the course of this week, but this is just such like a freak thing. I don't know if there's a playbook, to really
not at all
handle this situation. So, I mean, they're working night and day to try to get this right. And I trust that they will. I don't know personally if expanding the playoff is the correct move or what exactly is going to end up happening. But I think, no matter what, there's going to be probably some outsized outrage from people, however the NFL decides on this one, because that's just kind of how people are. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I think it's gonna end up being fine as far as how the AFC playoff picture is ultimately decided.
Yes, again, and I think especially now that we know that Damar Hamlin is moving in the right direction, I think that that makes this entire process easier. I think the NFL was kind of in a holding pattern for these last couple of days, and totally rightfully so. I think kind of the entire league was collectively kind of holding its breath to wait on this positive news, and thank goodness we got it. So my understanding, if they were to go forth with this contingency of going by win percentage, so let's assume Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati all win this weekend. That would mean KC's the 1, Buffalo 2, and Cincinnati 3. So the neutral site idea, that would only come into play if, one of those teams affected by the Cincinnati Buffalo non-game would be involved. So if the AFC title game is like Bills Chargers or Chiefs Jaguars or, Bengals Chargers, whatever you want it to be, those teams, in that case, my understanding is that the game would be played at those teams' home stadium. But if it's, if it's Bills Chiefs or Bills Bengals, however it shakes out, I think that is where they would move to that neutral site. Am I understanding that correctly?
I believe so. And the NFL might ultimately have to cross that bridge. I know that the NFL playoffs don't always go according to chalk. I mean, obviously, like the Bengals made an insane run from the wild card spot, or from the wild card onward last season, and able to make it all the way to the Super Bowl. So, but I think as it stands, I don't know. It's tough to sort through exactly these scenarios, but I think you do have it right in the sense that if it's one of the teams that's not affected by all of this, then it will go just as normal.
Yeah, and again, this is not finalized. It was just reported that had I think the word that Albert Breer used was it was getting some traction among teams and the league office. So we'll keep an eye on that over the next couple of days. I do think a solution or at least a plan has to be in place before Saturday because if you're talking about the possibility of adding another playoff team in each conference, like I don't think you can like retroactively add a team that thinks it's eliminated or a team that thinks it's not playing for anything all of a sudden is 2 hours before game time. So I expect that we will have something from the NFL prior to those kickoffs on Saturday. I think otherwise that would be just a completely messy scenario. And look, depending on what happens in Week 18, this could all be moot. A lot of this is assuming that teams that are favored are going to win, and as we know all too well, John, via this podcast, that is not always the case. So we'll see how it shakes out. But I did just kind of want to address that possibility since that news had come out within the last hour or so. But anyway, we will, over the next hour, we will keep you posted if anything else, kind of develops on that front. Other than that, we will kind of treat this as much of a normal Week 18 as we can. And that means we're diving into the line. So as usual, John, which line stuck out to you as maybe a bit too high as we head into a very complicated Week 18 with a ton of moving pieces as far as which games are meaningful, which aren't, which teams are playing starters, which aren't?
Right, exactly. I mean, we have some crazy stuff going on as far as the Jets-Dolphins game is concerned. We know that Tua is probably not going to be out there. Teddy Bridgewater dealing with an injury, so it might be Skylar Thompson time there in Miami, and that informed the line earlier this week. But now Mike White limited to practice on Thursday, so we don't really know. I know Rich Cimini, who covers the Jets, mentioned that White also wasn't available to the media today. So that's never a good sign necessarily for a guy's availability. So that's a line that I could see. I would just kind of encourage anyone looking to bet on that game to wait until, the Friday injury reports come out, because that one is definitely a tricky situation. But I felt like the Saints line, it doesn't like scream out that it's too high necessarily. But if this game were to be, or if we were to look at the spread this time last week before last weekend's action goes, you got to figure that the Panthers are much closer to being favored in that one. But the Panthers obviously ran into a Bucs team that woke up last week. All the Mike Evans investors in fantasy were like, "Oh, thanks a lot, Mike." But now and then you also look at the result from that Saints Philly game, and we see that the Saints being favored by more than a field goal. And I think that, yes, the Saints do have a home field advantage generally. One of the stronger ones in the league, and this year they've certainly been better at home for the most part. Last week notwithstanding, but I feel like the Panthers are still a good team. I think that. Or not a good team, but they're a team. They're a team that's playing, that's been playing better down the stretch. They were in the playoff hunt this time a week ago, and I just feel like the Saints, they aren't a team that with a whole lot as far as offensive identity is concerned. So I think that they should win this game, but trusting them by more than a field goal here feels a little bit off to me. So I feel like that line comes in a little bit high, and then sticking in the NFC South. I believe Tom Brady's going to be starting for the Bucs. I don't think he's going to play the entire game because, we had, so this one's real sticky, but when I see a -4 next to the Falcons, I get a little bit leery. So that to me seems like one that, maybe it's a stay away just in general, as far as like your parlays and everything else is concerned. But even if Brady's only out there for a half, the Falcon and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers kind of look like a last week of the preseason team out there. The Falcons already do look like a last week of the preseason team in a lot of senses. So they have no home field advantage. I feel like 4 is a little bit rich.
Yeah, I agree. I think the line is kind of calling the Bucs bluff a little bit as far as starters playing in this game. I know Todd Bowles has insisted that will be the case. Maybe I will not be shocked whatsoever if we don't see Tom Brady, we don't see Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Leonard Fournette, etc. And if we do see him, I don't even know if they make it through a half. I mean, this is a completely meaningless game for Tampa Bay. They are they're locked in as the 4 seed. So there's really nothing on the line outside of, potentially picking up an injury. So I'm with you on that one. I mean, the thing is, like, I get the Falcons being -4 here, but even against the Bucs backups, who aren't just going to lay down, these are guys who want to play, they have things to prove in the NFL. Like, I think the Falcons with Desmond Ridder are still maybe not all that much better than the Buccaneers with Blaine Gabbert or Kyle Trask at quarterback. So I'm with you there. Saints Panthers, to me, for sure, that's on the list. I just, neither of these teams are playing for anything. I think they're really evenly matched. I think this should be, if you want to say Saints at home, that's fine. It should be 2.5, maybe even 2. I know the Saints have won 3 in a row, but I don't think this is really like a momentum situation because there is nothing on the line. You played Philly with a backup quarterback who did not play well last week. So we're in agreement on those. And on the Jets, by the way, that line has been all over the place this week. It was Miami -3.5 as of Sunday. And even after the games on Sunday night, it was still 3.5. Then it moved to Jets -1.5. Then Miami 2.5. Now it's at Miami 2. That one to me, if it's going to be Zach Wilson at quarterback for the Jets, which I don't even know if that's possible, like based on how Robert Saleh was talking about Wilson this week, he was saying things like he just needs to get away from football, clear his mind a little bit. Like that doesn't sound like a guy who's going to suit up and start this weekend. So maybe it's Joe Flacco. Obviously the Jets are eliminated. The Dolphins still very much have things to play for. So I kind of do like the Dolphins even at -2, but not a strong endorsement either way. What about the Chiefs on Saturday? This is the afternoon game as part of the 2-game Saturday slate. That number's been hovering at 9.5. That's what we're seeing it at over at BetMGM right now. The Chiefs have done nothing but not cover big numbers all year. And obviously this is a meaningful game. We can't say exactly what the implications are because of how much things are up in the air with the AFC. But, Jarrett Stidham looked pretty good last week against the best defense in the league. And again, I'm kind of starting to lose faith in the Chiefs covering these big numbers. I think they win this game, but 9.5, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I got Chiefs by a touchdown here. So, that's 2.5 points to play around with on the part of the Raiders. I think there is something to be said, in regards to Stidham, where occasionally a guy that other teams don't have a ton of tape on, especially with a different team than the last time that we saw him on an NFL field in any meaningful way. You can kind of spring a surprise attack on somebody. Sometimes that surprise attack is just simply kind of doing what you had been doing and just throwing the ball to Devontae Adams. But hey, it worked. So I think the Raiders keep this one competitive enough, and I feel like the Chiefs, they'll get up, they'll get a lead, but they haven't been like overly impressive, like against the Broncos and so on over these last couple of weeks. So I feel like they are a team that plays with their food a little bit too much to really trust on the road. 9.5 points, that's a bit much for me.
I will say prime teaser candidate are the Chiefs this week, and we will revisit that toward the end of the pod. These are in my questionable category. I just want to highlight 2 lines that are just really tricky for a number of reasons. We're seeing both the Eagles and the 49ers as 2 touchdown favorites this weekend. 49ers 14-point favorites at home against the Cardinals. Philly, of course, at home against the Giants. I get it. Still a lot on the line as far as, not necessarily jockeying for position, but maintaining position. And for Philly, you got to win this game. You're assuming that Dallas is going to win, and you want to lock up not only the NFC East, but of course the 1 seed in the NFC as well. So I think there's plenty of reason to believe that both of these teams will be going for it. And, certainly aren't going to begin the game resting starters, but I think the conversation is, they're going to be, for one, they're going to know the result of the Minnesota game. That's in the early window, but Philly, San Francisco, Dallas, they're all going to be scoreboard watching throughout this game. So I expect all 3 to take care of business early. It's never a guarantee. We thought that last week about Dallas and Tennessee, of course, and Dallas ended up pulling away, but that was a much more competitive game early than most expected. But I think the concern, if you're taking Philly -14, or if you're taking San Francisco with the points, it's okay. Maybe they get up big early, but if Philly sees that, or if Dallas, for example, sees that, Philly is up 20 at the half, do they maybe pull back? So I think the big fear here is a, kind of a second half comeback that results in a backdoor cover.
Yeah, the backdoor going to be wide open in those games. That's so many points to be playing around with. In the Cardinals case, it's not going to be Trace McSorley, Mr. David Blau. Boiler Up going to be out there.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I could see the Cardinals covering this. I could also see the Giants, but like the Giants one is interesting on, in the part of the Eagles, because the Giants are effectively locked in the same way that the Bucks are to their respective playoff spot, I believe. So how motivated are they going to be? So that this could be like a tank off in game
Yep.
between the Eagles and the Giants. So in those type of situations, 14 points is just a lot to really trust with the team. So, I mean, it is in general, but when motivation is that big in question, and we could see that, the second stringers out there and stuff, ooh, that makes me feel dicey. So I'm on, I believe, both of those big underdogs. I'd be a little bit more inclined to go with the Niners just because the Cardinals are that bad.
Yes.
But either of those ones, I probably am going with the underdog to cover, just because so many points.
So on top of the Cardinals being terrible and potentially wanting to improve their own draft slot, I think the other thing too is San Francisco right now is very likely to end up as the 2. Like they need, of course, Philly to lose to have any shot at the 1. And, I think we could agree that's fairly unlikely. But again, they will know the result of that Minnesota game. And, if Minnesota wins, which we assume they will, they're big favorites against the Bears, who are starting Nathan Peterman. At that point, they'll know that they need to win the game. So I think there's a decent chance that San Francisco doesn't want to take any chances and just make sure that they win. I'm more confident that they play this as a quote unquote normal game than Philly. Philly, I guess, has the same type of stakes, but I think once Philly's comfortable, especially when you consider the health of Jalen Hurts, I could see them pulling back a little bit more. But San Francisco obviously does not want to fall down to the 3. On the Philly side, by the way, is there any sort of kind of momentum or get right aspect to this game where if they come out and they look clunky in the first half and maybe they're still up a touchdown or two, like do they kind of need to get their mojo back after 2 straight losses without Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, that's definitely a fair question. You don't want to go into the playoffs looking cold, and especially after the Eagles had been just so red hot over the entire course of this season. So I'm sure that they have things that they want to see happen, but I think that they have the bigger picture in mind. So I still foresee them being able to get out to the lead and being able to just kind of nurse it the rest of the way. So I feel like it's definitely a possibility that they try to go pedal to the metal and get a couple drives where they can feel good about how the offense looks now that Hurts is back. But I just have trouble seeing it being like a full bore game there in Philly.
So of all these teams that we're discussing, the anomaly team I think is Dallas. That you could see that kind of being a much bigger line. It's sitting at 7 right now. They're on the road at the Commanders. Washington, of course, eliminated. Apologies to Major Tutty. But what do you make of this Cowboys line? Because, again, they have the ability to somehow come out of this weekend as the 1 seed. But not only would they need Philly to lose, they also need San Francisco to lose as well. So it's very unlikely that both of those things happen. And I think that's factored into this Dallas line.
So I guess my question then would be, because all this action's happening in that late afternoon window, will the scoreboards be working at FedEx Field? Do we know that?
I think the teams at this point they have other sources potentially to get scores other than the scoreboard. Unfortunately, this is not like 1998 anymore. That would be hilarious, and it's a totally fair question. But I would imagine that Mike McCarthy will be able to get his hands on a score if he needs it.
Yeah, but I also think that Dan Snyder would also not consider that and think that his in-stadium scoreboards are the only thing, the only sources of intel, and therefore, he's got his like evil genius laugh going. Yeah. But
he's like flashing incorrect scores up there. It's like Eagles are up 75-2. What?
Now that is something I could see Bill Belichick doing. Yes. I don't even know if Snyder would have that. He would just know that there's an on-off switch basically. But beyond that, Washington's, they're going to be kicking the tires on Sam Howell in this one. That gives me a decent amount of interest in this game. I like Sam Howell as a prospect, and I think they need to figure out one way or the other if he's someone that they want to be giving a shot to, next, during training camp. That obviously affects what they're going to do in free agency and the draft and everything. So, they'll, even though they have nothing to play for, I don't think that they are going to be laying down necessarily. So this is a rivalry game. It means a lot to the Commanders. I mean, I grew up in the DC area. All my friends are Washington fans, and they hate Dallas a lot. Not that really makes a huge difference in this game, of course, but it's a rivalry game, so it's going to be treated as such on the Washington side. So I still kind of expect the Cowboys to win this one fairly handily, but I don't think it's going to be due to a lack of effort on Washington's part. But yeah, 7 points, 7.5 points. I still feel comfortable with Dallas covering that because they do have, legitimate stakes and a serious talent advantage. And, if Sam Howell looks rough in his debut there, then, he could be helping to fuel that cover for the Cowboys.
Yeah, again, a ton of balls in the air with these games. But in summary, I'm not going to get into all the permutations because there are like a million and I would just talk myself in circles. But there are scenarios where Philly could finish with the 1, 2, or 5 seed. Dallas could be the 1, 2, or 5. Minnesota can't get the 1. They can only be the 2 or the 3. But of course, that does matter. And San Francisco still technically alive for the 1, the 2, or the 3. So all kinds of things going on. And then, of course, Tampa Bay locked into the 4. The Giants locked into the 6. We do not know who the 7 seed will be at this time. Could be Seattle, could be Green Bay, could be Detroit. Before we move on, John, Major Tutty, I feel comfortable talking about this now. I've had some time to kind of let everything ruminate. I went back, I watched the hype video. I watched some of the in-game videos, discussed it with the XM producers last night. Where do we come in on Major Tutty? I feel like the reaction that I saw on social media over the weekend was decidedly mixed.
Yes, it was. It's a goofy looking fellow there, Major Tutty is, but I think it's a good job on Washington's part because I feel like the Hogs are such like a part of that team's history and identity dating back to, I believe, the 70s. I hope I'm not off on that. Maybe it was the Gibbs teams in the late 80s, early 90s, but either way, Hogs are big in Washington, so it was a smart call, especially when you have kind of like a faceless team name like the Commanders to have something that actually does draw onto your team's history and heritage and all of that. So I thought that was good. I actually thought before they dropped the name Commanders that the Washington Hogs would have been a sweet name, or the Red Hogs or something along those lines.
Wasn't Red Hogs on the list, or some sort of hog adjacent name was one of the potential ones?
Yeah, so Hogs were in the mix, and I like the pig running around with a strange helmet on. I think that it looks good. It's unique. It's different. So I'm frankly all for it. I guess I am a Major Tutty stan.
Okay, fair enough. And we should note, by the way, that the Hogs have disassociated themselves from the franchise and are potentially going to sue the franchise. So kind of interesting timing to launch a hog adjacent mascot while that is ongoing. But I mean, would you expect anything else from the Commanders? Like, of course, they potentially bungle their. Also, a weird time to reveal this. Like, why are you doing this in week 17 of the season? Like, it's like just totally random. I don't know if there's some sort of anniversary I'm not privy to, but my only complaint, like I personally don't like the term Tutty. I don't think I've ever said it in a serious context, so I have a little bit of an issue there. One, the pig is like a little too human-like. It's kind of like a scary mask that like a bank robber would use. So that's a complaint. And then it just looks a little clunky. Like, it doesn't look like a professional costume. It looks like just like an oversized white t-shirt that's like sloppily tucked into the pants. So I don't know. They have some things to workshop, but I will say in Major Tutty's defense, it's really hard to launch a mascot this late in the game. Like I think if the Jaguars said, hey, we're bringing out this new mascot, Jackson DeVille, people would be like, what the hell is this? Like, absolutely not. But because he's just been there for so long, we accept it as part of the team. So this is like when there's an expansion team and everybody hates the name. Like, I remember when the Oklahoma City Thunder joined the NBA, everybody was like, oh, this is terrible. This sounds like a WNBA team name or like an arena football team. And then all of a sudden the team got good and we haven't heard a peep about it. So my guess is that, there'll be a lot of complaints over the next few weeks, but midway through next season, we're not hearing much out of Major Tutty.
Yeah, good point. And then, last thing on the mascot front, were you watching Sunday night when Poe pulled the WWE skit?
That was sick. That was awesome.
That was absolutely electric. Easily the best part of Sunday night for me.
Yes.
The rest of it, abject disaster. But I was still just kind of like basking in what had happened earlier on January 1st. But yeah, that was that got me jazzed for sure.
Right.
And then the boys let me down.
As it should have. One more note on that Commanders-Cowboys game, by the way. Dak Prescott, 27-6 straight up, 24-9 ATS in divisional games in his career. That's pretty remarkable. Dallas is averaging 35.1 points per game since Dak returned from injury. And Dallas is averaging 35.8 points per game in its last 8 in-season rematch games against Washington. So basically the second time it plays Washington during the regular season, it's averaging almost 40 points per game. And those notes are via our pals over at VSiN. So a lot to like on the Dallas side. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm intrigued to see what Sam Howell's going to bring. My expectations aren't super high, but it's a hell of a lot more interesting than just rolling out Carson Wentz or Taylor Heineke again.
Yeah, certainly agree on Wentz. I don't know what's going to have to happen to me to get me off of Taylor Heineke. I'm still a believer.
Some sort of like hypnosis.
Yeah, I'm going to need to be put under some sort of deep spell to get that out of here.
All right. It is time for our final read of the regular season, John. You were on Bengals +1. That one's obviously voided, not counting out as a win or a loss, although they were up at the time the game was suspended. I was on the Jags -4, a much needed win for me, but I don't think it would be fair to put the read on you in that situation. So I think we should split it again.
All right, let's split it off or split it up, and this time may I do the honors of kicking it off.
Please do.
Very good. Kick off week 18 of the NFL season with the king of sportsbooks. Sign up with BetMGM using bonus code BETROTO. That's BETROTO. And your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions.
Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, Tennessee, Virginia, Washington, D.C., West Virginia, Wyoming, or Ontario only. Must be 21 years or older to wager. 19 or older in Ontario.
New customer offer only. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. Free bets expire 7 days from issuance, and this, of course, excludes Michigan disassociated persons. Please gamble responsibly.
Do you have a gambling problem? Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, D.C., Kansas, Louisiana, Nevada, Wyoming, or Virginia, 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan, 1-800-GAMBLER in Indiana, Maryland, New Jersey, or West Virginia, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Call or text the Tennessee Red Line at 800-889-9789 in Tennessee, or call 1-888-777-9696 in Mississippi.
In Ontario, if you have questions or concerns about your gambling or someone close to you, please contact Connects Ontario at 1-866-531-2600 to speak to an advisor free of charge. Sports betting is void in Georgia, Hawaii, Ohio, Utah, and other states where prohibited. Promotional offers not available in Nevada and New York.
All right. Well done, as always. We'll continue with that read, of course, through the playoffs. But yeah, I know you got a banger of a best bet coming up at the end of this episode. So make sure you stick around for that. All right, let's get back to the board. I do want to talk a couple futures as well if we have time, but want to make sure we give week 18 its due attention. And we have not even uttered the name Jacksonville Jaguars. Prime time. They can't get a Monday night game. They can't get a Sunday night game. But they'll do Thursdays, and Lord knows they'll do Saturdays. They are in the late window on Saturday night. Jags, 6.5-point favorites over Josh Dobbs and the Tennessee Titans. John, I've been waiting all episode to do this. The Jags hat's coming on.
Let's go. There it is. Dun, 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 dun.
I feel like I just got drafted.
Majestic. Where's your big suit?
Okay, so I've obviously thought a ton about this game. It's really all I've been thinking about for the most part over the last week. 6.5 to me, it's right on the borderline. I get it, but I will say after watching Josh Dobbs last Thursday I would certainly prefer that the Titans start Malik Willis. And I've heard some rumblings that maybe they're going to use both. I could see that, maybe a few packages here and there for Willis, or if Dobbs struggles, you could see them going back to Willis. On paper, it should be a really good spot for the Jaguars. I mean, Tennessee has done nothing but lose games for the last month and a half. The Jags, had a really nice kind of come from behind blowout win about a month ago over Tennessee. Jacksonville feels like it builds confidence, especially on defense every week. Trevor Lawrence is playing well. And yet, the counter argument is it is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I just can't help but get the thought out of my mind that they're going to find a way to kind of muck this game up.
Right, and Mario Puig was making a really good case earlier on the fantasy football pod, where the injury report for Tennessee just looks so much better this week than it did a week ago. Like in that game against the Cowboys, basically none of their viable players were available. Now Derrick Henry's fully off the injury report and has been since earlier in the week. You get guys like Jeffrey Simmons back. That all is a huge help as far as Tennessee is concerned. And I also just feel like Vrabel, I know it's been a rough month or so for the Titans, 6 weeks really, but Vrabel, I still view in a very high regard as far as his in-game coaching tactics, abilities, game planning, all that stuff to get the most out of his team. And, with the division, potentially still there for the taking, it's going to be tough. The Jags are, they're red hot right now. I think that they have entered that territory of team that you don't want to play in the postseason. But, Tennessee, they just kind of are that inconvenient truth a lot of the time. So I feel like they definitely have a legit shot here, even with the quarterback situation. And again, that speaks to how good of a coach Vrabel is, really, where you can still see a path for Tennessee winning this game despite Josh Dobbs, noted aeroscientist, getting the start. But I still side with the Jags to win. It's always a precarious position to like a team to cover and like the other team to win, especially when we're talking less than a touchdown. But that's kind of where I'm at with this game. I think the Jags squeak it out, but I do feel like Tennessee will not get boat raced here.
No, I that's the number one thing I'm confident about in this game is that we get a good game. I do not see the Jags running away with this by any means. And I don't see Tennessee running away with it either, of course. But I think this is kind of this is like the perfect storm Mike Vrabel game, right? And I know there are a few games in this recent stretch where we kind of thought that, and you keep wanting to give the benefit of the doubt to Mike Vrabel. And look, we got to be honest, the Titans have lost 6 in a row. I mean, they are down bad. They lost to the Houston Texans. That was a very meaningful game, and they could not pull it off. So again, I understand why the Jags are 6.5-point favorites here, but I think the Titans absolutely make this a game. I mean, Derrick Henry essentially coming in off of an extended bye week. Tennessee overall has the rest advantage here, having last played on Thursday. The Jags, of course, played Sunday. And I know their starters didn't finish that game, but still, they played essentially the first 2/3 of that game. So I think that still counts. We do have to keep in mind that the Jags could lose this game and still get in if the Steelers, Dolphins, and Patriots all lose. Relatively unlikely, but possible. Obviously, the Jags would prefer to win this game, but I went with the Titans to cover the 6.5. I have the Jags winning, I'll say something like, 24-20.
Yeah, no, that checks out. And again, that results in Jags win, Titans cover. Yeah, that's where I'm at with it too.
I do have one pretty deep note here, so try to follow along. Road teams having lost at least their last 5 games outright and playing as underdogs of 6 points or larger are 3-15 straight up, 6-12 ATS since 2012. And this is over the final 3 weeks of the season. So the trends are on the side of the Jags. They're playing this game at home. They're going all teal. They did a little teaser video today. They're painting the end zones teal. So they're going to be ready. But, Derrick Henry has obviously tormented this franchise many a times in the past. So I'm cautiously excited for this one, but, a little bit wary of going all in on the Jags at this point. We talked a little bit about Bucks Falcons. Not a whole lot to say there. I think there's just a lot unknown. What about Pats Bills? This is in the early window on Sunday. Bills 7-point favorites. The obvious storyline, we know what that is. The Bills kind of having to turn around and play another football game in less than a week. But as we discussed at the top, I think given the positive news on Damar Hamlin, there were some interviews with players, on the Bills and even around the league earlier today that said, they were basically like, it just feels like, the the curtain has been lifted. I know that's not the
Mm-hmm.
right expression, but I just think there's a sense of relief around the league that pressure is gone, that the worry, the concern for your teammate. With that said, it still makes me. I'm still kind of confounded as far as how to evaluate this game. It really is an unprecedented situation. I don't want to get too much into like the emotional side of it. I don't think there's a lot of merit there, but with that said, I really could see Buffalo kind of rallying around this. I don't necessarily see it as a negative, if that makes sense.
Right. I think, if things were different, then we'd be looking at this in a different way. And,
Yes.
we don't even know if this game would ultimately end up being played. But, with the way things are trending, that guys are lacing them up on Sunday. And I feel like the Bills, I mean, that they are who we think they are. I mean, they are just an excellent team. They're one of the best, if not the best teams in the league. And the Patriots just, they've got individual pieces here and there, but the offense makes no sense. They're traveling to Buffalo for this one. Buffalo handled them pretty nicely on a Thursday nighter earlier this year. So 7 points, obviously it's a magic number, and it's, tempting to just take the points in a division game like that. And the Patriots, obviously, they have a slim chance, but they aren't eliminated yet. So, that they're going to be, up for this one.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think the Bills are leaps and bounds better than this Patriots team, and they're at home. I think they want to kind of like send out a "we back up" type of statement here to end the regular season, because I feel like the Bengals and the Chiefs have kind of like taken up a lot of the discourse as far as who the best team in the AFC is right now. And I think the Bills want to kind of like reassert themselves into that conversation.
Yeah. And again, we don't exactly know what the seeding implications are going to be at this time. But if you're Buffalo, you obviously want to win this game. And regardless of what the NFL decides, I mean, there's still a path to Buffalo being treated as the number one seed in the AFC. So, there's plenty of motivation on the Buffalo side. Like you said, still a lot to play for New England. But I go back to last year. New England won the wind game against Buffalo early in the year. And then week 16, they meet again at New England. Buffalo wins 33-21. And we know what happened in the wild card game, 47-17 Buffalo. So, I think we traditionally think of New England kind of owning that entire division, but it's not the case anymore. This is not the same New England team. I've kind of personally had to like work hard to get that sentiment out of my mind. So I'm with you. This number, it's a really tough game to handicap, for a number of reasons, but I think 7's about right. And I'm on Buffalo.
I'm on Buffalo too. Could definitely, this one's definitely on push watch though.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the Patriots have just found ways these last few weeks to hang around, and if there's a team you trust to do it, it is them. Let's go to Vikings Bears, also in the early window on Sunday. This line has jumped up. I think it opened at 5.5 Minnesota, now up to 7.5 at BetMGM. That is directly linked to the Nathan Peterman situation. So, kind of the similar type of scenario that we talked about with these other NFC teams still playing for seeding. But, Minnesota has to be prepared for the possibility of San Francisco losing. They could move up to that 2. They can't fall any further than 3. So we do have to keep that in mind. And they are playing kind of by themselves in this early window. So there won't really be a whole lot of scoreboard watching to do for Minnesota.
Yeah, this game features two like just extremely powerful forces of nature, right? Because on the one hand, the Vikings are physically incapable of playing a normal football game.
Correct.
They are also, unless they are losing, incapable of being involved in a anything other than a one-score game. And when the spread's 7.5, makes you a little nervous. But then on the other side, the other just sheer force of nature is Nathan Peterman. So I mean, it makes it really tough. My lean, honestly, and it feels gross saying it, but that almost makes me feel better about it in a weird way. 7.5, take the Bears.
You are a sick man. You are a sick man.
Yeah, and the sickness is going to continue later in the pod, but at this, I just feel like the Vikings, yes, they should just kind of want to approach this game and take care of business, and get the stink of last week's game completely out of the locker room and everything. But they are so hard to trust. You sent me message earlier this week that they are the worst team in terms of point differential with as many wins as they have, like dating back to, I forget when you're
I was since 1970. There were, I believe it was 193 teams that had at least 12 wins, and I sorted all 193 by point differential. And Minnesota was unsurprisingly far and away the lowest point differential. They were the only team in the negative. I think the next lowest was like plus 35. I mean, there's almost no precedent for what's going on this year with Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Of course, like the Bears are awful, and they should be very interested in losing this game for draft purposes and everything. So that you have to take that into account as well. But I just feel like the Vikings being incapable of playing normal games, playing it, they love the one score game. So somehow they're going to get roped into one there in Chicago. That's where I'm at with it.
Logically, you make a good point. I mean, they have one win all year by more than one score, and that was week 1 against Green Bay. So statistically, I get it. The counter argument is just Nathan Peterman defies statistics. We've never seen anything like this. He's a one of a kind talent, and I think there's a reason that they're starting him. Like I don't know that Justin Fields' hip injury or whatever it is all that severe. And you mentioned the draft thing. There are a few games that we're going to talk about that have major draft position implications. This one being number 1, and I think the reason why that is because the team that is currently the holder of the number 1 pick, the Houston Texans, they have a winnable game on their schedule against the Colts, who are starting Sam Ehlinger. And I think Houston, maybe is going to try to do a few things to lose that game, but it might be out of their control. The Colts just may not allow them to do so. So it's just so hard to judge because, I think the tanking thing is much more of a ownership front office concern versus the players on the field. Like the guys are out there are going to play hard. I don't think that's a question. I just don't I know the Vikings have been really confounding to evaluate, but with Peterman especially, the Bears could try their hardest to win this game, and I just don't think they have the talent.
They don't. I mean, they're terrible on defense, and now the only good thing about their offense is not playing. So definitely,
fair.
This is one where I could end by like the end of the first quarter. But at the same time, like I'm gonna stick to my gut here and say that the Bears find a way to make this one ugly enough for the Vikings and go ahead and get it done. But I also have visions of Justin Jefferson getting retribution for last week and just absolutely torching whatever poor excuses the Bears have at corner.
Yeah, it's about still finding a way to break the receiving record after finishing last week with 15 yards. Ravens Bengals,
not good for your boys' fantasy interests last week with what Jefferson did.
Yeah, I think you're speaking for many with that one. Cincy, Baltimore, Bengals by 7. So we're getting kind of the same line with the Bengals as we are with the Bills. I think it is in some ways a similar situation. Bengals 21-3 ATS in their last 24, 18-2 ATS in their last 20 rematch games. So the second time that they're playing a team in a given season. However, Baltimore 13-3 in their last 16 road rematch games. So kind of competing forces there. Obviously, the big story here, we don't expect Lamar Jackson to play yet again. And it's getting to the point, John, that you have to start worrying about his availability for the wild card round.
Yep. All along, it seemed when the injury happened that Christmas Eve was a reasonable time to expect him back. Doesn't play there. Doesn't play last week, of course, against Pittsburgh. Not going to play this week. So the Ravens are just dead in the water. They have a playoff spot, but Lamar Jackson coming off of that long of a layoff in the wild card round is just a recipe for disaster. It's going to be so clunky. And that's, I feel like making kind of a big leap that he's even going to be ready for the start of the playoffs. So this is bad news for Baltimore. I depending on what the league does, but I think we know by virtue of the time slot of this game that the Ravens effectively have no chance at winning the division if they won this game outright, but it still doesn't appear to be the case. So it's going to be Tyler Huntley, who's been banged up all week, or one Anthony Brown getting trotted out there. And I think the Bengals just paced them. I think that the Ravens are in that big of trouble offensively. The defense looked shoddy against a awful offensive line last week. The Steelers ran all over the Ravens last week on that Sunday night game in their own house. One of those games that the Ravens have been, or the sample that you mentioned, one of those rematch games was last year against the Bengals. They had to start Josh Johnson in that game. The Ravens did, and the Bengals just absolutely eviscerated them. I watched that with my grandparents, and they were horrified at what they were watching on the TV screen as Ravens fans. So yeah, even though there's some question marks here and there about this game, I feel like the Bengals are just the class of the AFC or close to it, and I think the Ravens are just, they're not playing out the thread necessarily, but they just don't have it. They're lacking it in all the wrong spots, and it's going to continue to get exposed. And I think Cincinnati likes taking it to the Ravens a little bit too. So.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens have scored 13, 17, 3, 16, and 10 points in their last 5 games. They also put up 13 on the Carolina Panthers in week 11. I mean, their big eruption during that span was 27 against Jacksonville, and they somehow still managed to lose that game, despite winning games where they scored 13, 10, 16, and 17. I just don't think they can keep up, unless Joe Burrow just doesn't have it. You think of like that week 1 game against Pittsburgh, where I think he turned it over 5 times. Like, it kind of feels like this has to be a game that is just absolutely dominated by the Ravens defense if they have any shot, because if Cincinnati scores more than 23 points, I think they cover this game pretty easily. And I think they do. They're at home, and again, not really knowing what's going on with the seeding. I think if you're Cincinnati, you just assume you have to win, and maybe you still have a chance at the 1, who knows, but losing does not help your case here. So still plenty of things to play for the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's go to Texans Colts. Not a ton to say about this game. All-time meaningless game. However, we're looking at some pretty serious NFL draft implications.
Right, exactly. So I'm on the Texans, but again, when you bake in the draft implications here, and the potential for Houston to mess up their way into getting or winning the Bryce Young sweepstakes, are they really going to? But I don't see Lovie Smith doing it that way. I think that they're going to go in there and compete. 2.5. They could definitely still lose, but still cover. I am on the Texans. I just think Indianapolis, this is a true tank off, absolutely. And Indianapolis, the last couple of weeks have been pathetic. Sam Ehlinger, for him to get the ringing endorsement from Frank Reich saying he's going to start the rest of the year, and then Reich gets fired. They bring in Jeff Saturday. Saturday doesn't even look at Ehlinger until he absolutely has to. It's going to be a mess offensively for Indianapolis as well. So as bad as Houston looked last week, I would say on balance over the last month have shown a bit more moxie than this Indianapolis team. So I like Houston, even if it's the smarter move for them to really not do anything in this game. I don't think you can apply the smart move logic to Houston all the time. So here we go. Go Texans.
Right. I think Houston has just kind of had this stink on them all season, but if you just take the last 5 or 6 weeks, they've been a bad team. I mean, there's no doubt about that, but I mean, they've probably been like the 27th or 28th best team in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have not been the worst team for a while. They've hung in with some really quality opponents. Of course, they beat Tennessee. That's really what kind of started this whole fiasco of potentially losing the number 1 pick. And it is worth noting that Houston can't fall further than second. So it kind of depends how much they value first versus second. Obviously, you'd prefer to pick first, but that they might have certain guys in mind where it's not really that big of a deal. And with the Colts, they don't have a great chance to move up. They would currently pick 5th in the 2023 draft, and the teams that are ahead of them, you're watching like Denver, Arizona, like they're likely to lose on Sunday. So you're probably not looking at moving up, but you could definitely move down if you win this game. So it's really hard. It's kind of competing from both sides. I think I went with the Colts in staff picks. I mean, this is an all-time difficult game to pick. I probably stay away for me.
Yeah, it's fascinating in terms of how meaningless that this game is. Like it's as far as like the on-field stakes are concerned. So I mean, it's wild, and little gamesmanship here. Just kind of thinking out the scenario when you mention how the Texans couldn't fall any further than second. The Bears, they have Justin Fields. So like if you're worried about losing out on your quarterback by moving off the number 1 spot, you would be very thankful that it's the Bears moving up and not someone else that is indeed quarterback needy. So I feel like the number 2 draft pick for regardless is kind of going to be up for sale. I still think it's going to be the Bears at 2 and Houston at 1. But yeah, I just feel like Houston, even if they win, they can still end up with Bryce Young. Whereas, Indianapolis, I guess it is a little bit trickier if they win.
I will say, I do think the Bears, if they get the number 1 pick, I think it becomes an auction and somebody moves up and, maybe takes Bryce Young. And obviously Houston's not going to want to have to pay to go from 2 to 1, but we could talk ourselves in circles on this all day. I really have no idea how this is going to play out, but you said it. I mean, I would be prepared in this Colts Texans game. I'd be prepared for hijinks, larks, pranks, antics,
chicanery,
any of the above. Let's just move on from this game. We need to cleanse our palate. And to do so, we're going to Browns Steelers. This is the final game in the early window. Steelers 2.5-point favorites. The Steelers cannot play their way in, but they need a win to stay alive. Also need a little bit of help. Do they get it done here? 2.5-point favorites at home.
I'm going to say that they don't. I don't think that last week proved anything other than the Ravens are actually not good, but the Steelers are definitely not good either. It's not like the Browns are very good, so it's a fair counterpoint there. But Watson throws 3 touchdowns last week on 9 completions. It was against Washington, to be fair.
Ultra efficient.
Ruthless. But I think that maybe that is a little bit of signal that, yes, it took a while for it to start clicking, and he only completed, I think, like 50% of his passes. But maybe that, this Cleveland offense is going to be closer to full strength here. And I think that, with the way that the NFL sets up these last week of the regular season games where it's all divisional, I don't think the Browns just want to go ahead and let the Steelers keep themselves alive in the playoff hunt. So I think they want to go in there and win this game, ruin that season for the Steelers. And, I still feel, I fall back on my analysis of Pittsburgh, where they have talent in some spots. They have a terrible offensive line. I think that Myles Garrett and company are going to be able to eat it alive. I don't think that the Steelers are going to be able to run the ball at the same level of effectiveness that they did last week, even though Cleveland's run defense on balance is worse than the Ravens. I don't think that they necessarily figured anything out. I think that was just the Ravens choking, which they always seem to do in the second half this year. So the things that worked last week aren't going to work again the same way. And I think that the Steelers also have to contend with a much better offense than what they did in Baltimore on Sunday night. So I think the Browns go in there and they win this one outright.
Interesting. Okay. I think we get another just typical AFC North low scoring game, no matter what. I will say that total in this game is hanging around 40. It's at 40.5 right now at BetMGM. I'm still not convinced on the Browns whatsoever. And, like I said, the Steelers are still potentially playing for a playoff spot. They need New England to lose to Buffalo, and they need Miami to lose to the Jets. Both of those things could very well happen. So a lot on the line for Pittsburgh. If nothing else, the Mike Tomlin non-losing season streak remains on the line. But at the same time, it really felt like the Steelers probably should have lost the last 2 games and pulled them both out, late in the game, game-winning touchdowns, game-winning field goals, things of that nature. You can't keep doing that every week. You can't just depend on kind of getting these luck type of plays at the end of the game. So I don't feel strongly about it, but I am on Pittsburgh 2.5. If it goes up to 3, then it becomes a stay away. Okay.
I mean, that's definitely fair. And there's ways in which, the Browns, even with Watson, have been very uninspiring for much of this season. So, I mean, that it certainly could play out where the Steelers, who are a much better coach team, but I believe talent's about equal here. Sure. It is in Pittsburgh. Something to be said for that. But all things considered, I think the edge at quarterback is significant enough, and the rest of the pieces there for Cleveland I think that they're just a bad matchup for Pittsburgh, basically. And I think that they're going to, sour the Steelers' dreams. All right. In the late window, we don't need to rehash Giants, Eagles, Cowboys, Commanders, Cardinals, 49ers. I think we hit those pretty good. So we got 3 games left. Chargers, Broncos. Suddenly a very interesting game. This line has been on the move pretty significantly just in the last few hours. Kind of completely reversed since the announcement that Cincy and Baltimore will be played in the noon window. That, of course, means that the Chargers will know the result of that game before this game kicks off. And
if the Ravens lose to Cincinnati, which we are both on the Bengals -7, then the Chargers are locked in as the 5 seed. So, if you're following the line movement, we're now seeing the Broncos as 2.5-point favorites at home. I believe it was at Chargers 3 earlier today, was as high as 3.5 at some other inferior sports books. But I think the heavy implication here is that as of right now, the general expectation is the Ravens lose, and then we see a situation where it's probably Chase Daniel under center for the Chargers.
Chase Daniel, again, one of the most legendary bag collectors in NFL history. I mean, for the dollars per throw that in his career, simply remarkable. But yeah, I think that, again, the Ravens are going to lose, and therefore the Chargers have nothing really to play for in this one, nothing to risk, nothing to venture. So yeah, I think that we're going to see just kind of a second team type of approach here from the Chargers, and therefore somehow I think the Broncos, they want to kind of keep the positive momentum going as best as they can. Maybe get some of the terribleness of this season out as they go into the off season. So it's wild how the line is shaped, but I mean, I think that you got to follow this movement and just kind of roll with it. And I think that the Broncos are the play here.
Yeah, I think this is a bit of a wait and see for me. Certainly there is some value in grabbing the Broncos now. I think that line could move perhaps even more in their favor if the Ravens do indeed lose, and we get official confirmation that not only Justin Herbert potentially not playing in this game, but you could see Austin Eckler not playing. You could see both of the receivers, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, who are always fairly fragile, not playing in this game. And look, I mean, the Chargers are a very top heavy roster, right? They depend on their top 5 to 8 guys if you're talking offense and defense. And if the bulk of those guys aren't playing, it becomes a very, very below average roster very quickly.
Yes. Yeah. Top heavy, very much like their roommates at SoFi Stadium, the Rams.
Yes.
But at least the Chargers this year, their top end players are actually good. But similar build in that sense. So you have to sit those guys, because if they're injured, then you have even less of a shot to make a run in the postseason. So you got to keep them healthy, even if going in a little bit rusty into the postseason. There are cases to be made for and against it. But I think the Chargers don't have that luxury, so that they're going to see the results in Cincinnati and go ahead and just let this one ride out.
Yeah, it could be marching their way directly in to Fred Taylor Field for Wild Card Weekend if things break my way. This is another low total, by the way, sitting at 40 right now at BetMGM. We only have 2 games with a total over 43 this week. One of those is Raiders Chiefs, that's 52.5, and then Lions Packers in the Sunday night window at 49. Let's do Rams Seahawks quick, then we'll finish out with Lions Packers. Seahawks 6-point favorites. They're kind of in the same position as the Steelers. They cannot play their way in, but they need a win to stay alive. And then they need Green Bay to lose to the Detroit Lions on Sunday night. So the general expectation is that Seattle, plays this out full game. You don't really worry about starters being pulled, anything like that. They need to make sure they win. But John McKechnie, do they cover 6 points at home?
I don't think so. They obviously got off the mat last week, and I think maybe some of my Rams confidence here late in the season post the Baker Mayfield signing might not be the sharpest in the world, but they did play the Seahawks really close earlier this season, almost beat them pre Baker Mayfield. So I don't know. I think the Rams, they're gonna come in there, and I think they're gonna make this one a little bit uncomfortable for the Seahawks. And I don't think the Seahawks will have the same type of success as they did last week against the road weary Jets. So I foresee the Rams making this one uncomfortable and covering, and the Seahawks winning this one by a field goal to stay alive.
I kind of feel the same way. This one was split in staff picks. We actually had it at Rams 6.5. I was pretty comfortable on the Rams there. They kind of do have a just playing loose, playing for nothing type of energy these last few games, and they've traded off being really competitive and kind of getting blown out. Last week was not a banner week for the Rams, but I just think there's this berserker quality to Seattle where I think there are a lot of teams, if they're in this position, you would say, okay, yeah, I trust them. They'll take care of business. They're at home. You could totally see Seattle finding a way to make a complete mess of this game. And on the other side, I mean, we keep talking about draft position. The Rams do not owe their pick. It goes to Detroit. So they have no motivation to lose this game.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's just completely out the window for them. The draft just like doesn't really exist in the Rams front office. No. They don't care for it. The only thing they care about is trading whatever picks they get to go get somebody else who's already established. And it's worked for them. But, there's the other side of it, which we've seen all season. So, I'm sure that the Lions are very pleased with how things have gone. But at the same time, I think the Rams aren't going into this one being like, oh, we got to move up so we can get Keely Ringo or something.
All right, we finish out Sunday Night Football, Lions, Packers. There's been some a little bit of whining, from Lions fans about really Seattle fans, I guess, more than anything, about this game kind of being isolated, knowing the result of that Seattle game. I get it from the NFL's perspective. The Packers having a chance to play their way in. It's a pretty compelling narrative. I think we forget sometimes that this is more about entertainment and TV ratings first than it is fairness. I think the NFL has just proven that over and over again. Anyway, we are seeing the Packers as 4.5-point favorites at home at BetMGM. Opened at 3.5, went up to 4.5 pretty quickly. That's where it's sat for most of the week. How are you looking at this game?
This is the highlight of the week, and it's one of the trickiest. I mean, in a week where they're all really tricky, this one stands out because the Lions could be dead in the water by the time that the ball is kicked off. But I think that they're going to give the Packers all they can handle. I guess I have a parallel thinking to this game as I do with the Rams versus the Seahawks, but the Lions are actually like pretty good. So they obviously beat the Packers earlier this year in a game that I don't think is super applicable to this game. I don't think we had seen Christian Watson break out yet. Who's the special teams guy?
Keyshawn Nixon, baby.
Yeah. I don't think that he had taken the world by storm just yet. So totally different team there in early November as compared to now. I expect the Packers to win this one. I'm inclined actually to say that they cover as well. I think that this is going to fuel if you're looking at which old quarterback to hitch your wagon to going into the postseason between Brady and Rodgers, I'm on Team Rodgers for that one for a lot of reasons. But I just think that the Packers are going ahead, and the Lions are just going to kind of prove that they're not quite there yet in front of literally everybody.
I think that's the most likely outcome. I will say I think Green Bay still needs to approach this game with caution. I think the Lions have a ton of skill guys that could really make this a game. I don't expect it to be anywhere close to the type of game that we saw last week in Green Bay against Minnesota. I think Detroit shows up. I think even if Seattle wins and Detroit can't make the playoffs, that there's going to be some reduction in motivation. I think it's just innate. It just happens. But I don't think the Lions are going to lay down whatsoever. I think Dan Campbell is like the number one, not even NFL coach, just number one person in the world that still wants to make this a meaningful game. So I think Detroit is really going to give the Packers a run for their money. I really do. I'm not quite ready to buy back in on this Packers defense. It's been fantastic the last 2 weeks, creating a ton of turnovers, but you can't necessarily bank on that every week. We know the Jared Goff outdoor numbers. We know the Jared Goff home versus road. 23 of his 29 touchdowns have come at home this season. It's astonishing. It's certainly a mark in favor of Green Bay, but kickoff temperature is going to be like 25, 30 degrees, no wind, no precipitation. Like this is not exactly, the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. So I get the sense talking to people in Wisconsin, like there's a lot of people just talking already about playing the 49ers and as if this game is in the bag. And like, I know that this is, it's the Detroit Lions, but this is not the traditional Lions. They've already lost this game to Detroit earlier this season. That was probably Green Bay's lowest point, to be honest. That was the two end zone interceptions by Aaron Rodgers, one of which was intended for David Bakhtiari on a leak out play. It was ugly.
Is that one of Aiden Hutchinson's many interceptions this year?
Yes, it was. And you said it's like that was a different Green Bay team. It was. You're totally right. I think it was a different Detroit team at that time. That was their second win of the season when they beat Green Bay. They had just lost 5 in a row. They had been blanked by New England. They had that ugly game against Dallas. And since then, I mean, they have scored 31, 25, 40, 34, 20, 23, 41 in every game since that Green Bay win, which was a 15-9, just ugly fest. So I think this game is, the total is sitting up at 48. I think that's justified. And I do still have my concerns about that Green Bay defense. So I took the Lions to cover. I think the Packers win this game, but I don't think they do it overly convincingly. I will be in the house, John, at Lambeau Field on Sunday night. So I will say I'm happy with this time slot for pregame preparation purposes, if you will. It's going to be a good time, but I'm fully expecting to kind of witness a nervous crowd at Lambeau Field. I don't think they're going to have this one sewn up at halftime like last week.
Yeah, I'm hoping, similar to last year, but ultimately ending in your favor, and also the Packers covering, but something goofy like the last game of the season last year between the Chargers and the Raiders on that Sunday night game.
Could absolutely see that. All right, let's get to the parlays of the week. We got a teaser of the week as well. Let's lead it off with your afternoon delight parlay, John.
Okay, all right, here we go. So this all in the late afternoon window. Give me the Giants plus 14. Give me the Broncos minus 2.5, and give me the Rams plus 6. That checks in for a nice little plus 595 payout.
Okay, good stuff there. I like it a lot. I'm going to go with the Cowboys minus 7. I'm going to go with the Steelers minus 2.5. And I'm going to go with the Packers minus 4.5. I'm kind of hedging a little bit here. I know I said I took the Lions in staff picks. One of these is going to be right. So
you're right.
Play both sides here. And this also gets you to plus 595. So we're in agreement there. You're going Giants, Broncos, Rams, all those spreads. I'm going Cowboys, Steelers, and Packers. Let's go to the underdog parlays of the week.
Okay, so these have 2 money lines and a spread. Give me the Browns money line plus 120. Give me the Texans money line plus 120, and give me the Panthers plus 3.5 in New Orleans. That'll get you a nice little $8.24. So $8.24 for every $1 that you put on that. Not too shabby.
The old Deshaun Watson, Davis Mills, Sam Darnold parlay.
We love it. Just how we drew it up. Just what I envisioned when we sat down to do this podcast back in early September.
All right, so I'm going with a money line and 2 spreads here. I'm with you on the Panthers. I'm taking the Panthers money line. I think they can win this game straight up. I'm taking the Ravens plus 7 here. I am. I think talking about that defense, kind of a tough spot for Cincinnati. Divisional battle. We'll see if they can keep it close. And I'll take the Titans plus 6.5 on Saturday night. We talked about that game. A little bit of an emotional hedge, actually a complete emotional hedge. But we still need help from your Ravens and from the Panthers here. That brings you to plus 774. Again, that's Panthers money line, Ravens plus 7, Titans plus 6.5. We now move to this week's teaser. We are going with another 7-pointer. Last week, complete disaster. The Chiefs sunk us. We teased the Colts up to 13. Did not matter at all. That they were never close to covering that. We also teased the Vikings up to 10.5. Not even close. Never even mattered. So this week, I like the numbers here. They're more favorable than last week. I'll say that. So 7-pointer. This gets you to plus 130. We are going to tease the Chiefs from 9.5 down to 2.5. So they got to win by a field goal against the Raiders. We are going to tease the Vikings from 7.5 down to 0.5. So just got to win straight up against the Chicago Bears. And we are going to tease that Browns Steelers total, John, up from 40.5 to 47.5. And we're, of course, going to take the under on that. So Chiefs 2.5, Vikings just got to win, Cleveland, Pittsburgh under 47.5.
My God, if that Steelers Browns game it hits the over on the tease total, I don't even, like at that point, like we got to both just go take a long walk.
Yeah. Is that the biggest liability of these? I don't know. For some reason, I find myself thinking it's the Chiefs because I don't see the Bears winning that game against Minnesota. No. I don't know. It's somehow it's going to find a way to lose.
It very well could, but yeah, I mean, on paper right now, it looks great to me, and that's what's concerning.
All right. If you're throwing in any parlays, if you want to tail us on those, if you want to jump on the teaser of the week, make sure you're doing that over at betmgm.com, BetMGM app, and of course, use our promo code BETROTO. Your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. John, let's lock it up. Who are you going with this week?
Give me the Browns plus 2.5 in Pittsburgh. It's, you know what? It's such a weird week. I'm leaning into it. I'm steering into the skid. Give me the Brownies to play spoiler in Pittsburgh on Sunday.
I have no comment on that. I am you're a brave man for making that your best bet. I'll leave it at that. I'm going with Minnesota, 7.5. I know it's not a friendly line, that's for sure. You prefer that be a point lower, but it's not, and that's what happens when you play against Nathan Peterman. We've laid it out. If you want to listen back to our discussion on Vikings Bears, just hit that -15 button a few times. You could find it. I don't see the Bears wanting to win this game. I think they're waving the white flag with Peterman, and there's still something to play for here with Minnesota, especially being that only game in the early window. So Browns 2.5 for John McKechnie. I will go with the Vikings -7.5 against the Chicago Bears. That will do it for the Week 18 edition of the RotoWire Sports Gambling Podcast. Again, make sure you're betting on BetMGM this weekend, betmgm.com, the BetMGM app. And it is very, very important that you use our promo code BETROTO, BETROTO. Best of luck this weekend.
Happy birthday,
you
Mom.
You want to talk some college football?
Yeah, let's do it.
Actually, if you want me to include that, say it again and I'll splice it in because I think I talked over you.
Oh, all right. Happy birthday, Mom.
Perfect. All right, I'll put that back in there. Okay, I'm gonna run out real quick. I have to text Molly a photo of a grocery list, but I'll be back in like 30 seconds.
Great.
All right, we're back.
All right, let's do this.
We can just splice this off as a separate college football pod.
Perfect. Yeah, man, I'm ready.
What is this thing that was blocked in the chat?
Oh, it was Russian disinformation. Now I don't know what it was, but it was not in line with our core values of the RotoWire comment section. So I had to say goodbye.
Get him out of there. All right. I'll do a separate intro quick, and then we will talk some natty.
Great. Let's do it.
All right. It is time to talk some college football. We got the national championship coming up on Monday. Jonathan, very eager to hear your thoughts on the Dogs, who were opening up as 13.5 point favorites against TCU, numbered down to 12.5 over at BetMGM. How are you feeling right now? I know you're going to be in the house for the national championship game. When are you heading out to LA?
So yes, I will be heading out to Los Angeles on Sunday. Get there. I was surprised at the flight options, especially living like in a hub, but I'm basically like having to connect in Newark to get out to Los Angeles. So it's going to be a long travel day for me on Sunday. Land in LA Sunday night. The game kicks off at 4:30 local time on Monday afternoon. So there is no tailgating at SoFi Stadium for this game. So yeah, I don't know what kind of California rules or whatever tell me I can't have a cocktail in the parking lot before the game, but we're this is the world that we live in, and got to deal with it. Got to make the best of our circumstances. But as far as this game is concerned, last weekend was just so insane. Like usually we get one good but not great semifinal game, and we get a dud. Both were instant classics on Saturday. I mean, for TCU to do what they did, hand up, I was most confident. Like, if all my confidence picks for bowl season that Michigan was going to win at the very least. I wouldn't have put them as my all-time favorite to cover, but I got that wrong with Florida State also. So a little back to the drawing board for me as far as my bowl season process goes after a couple of good years there. But I was shocked to see Michigan kind of, they got bullied. And I keep coming back to, the sort of butterfly effect of Donovan Edwards having that huge run to open the game and then Michigan not scoring on that drive. And that gave TCU such a jolt. They obviously had a couple of pick sixes in there, and we're a huge play to Quentin Johnson for a long touchdown. Dugan didn't even play his best game, and they were still able to win. So it was just an unbelievable performance from TCU in that one, because I really felt like Michigan was a very, very quality team. Arguably the best team in the country. So for them to beat, for TCU to beat Michigan, it absolutely has to put Georgia on notice in this one. And I think that the spread, even though it's come down a little bit, it still strikes me as a little bit too high. I'd be confident taking TCU all the way to like 9.5 as far as underdogs we're concerned. I think that they have a legitimate shot at winning, and the odds are favorable enough. If you want to go TCU money line, it could certainly happen, and your payout will be pretty nice on that one. As far as Georgia's concerned, people have asked me how my New Year's Eve was. I tell them terrible, but my New Year's Day was great, because right as the ball dropped, basically, is when the Dogs' fortunes changed for the better. But boy, that was a stressful evening on Saturday night. And some of the problems that Georgia had against Ohio State, are they really going away against TCU? Like, it's not like Ohio State was running the ball great against Georgia. So that makes me think that like the Kendre Miller injury for TCU doesn't really matter that much. And if anything, it's just going to make TCU a little bit more inclined to just go after the secondary again. And the Ohio State, I think Stroud's a better pure passer than Dugan, but Dugan's still really good. He's a Heisman finalist for a reason. He can also make plays with his legs, and that's been a problem for Kirby Smart coach defenses in the past, where mobile quarterbacks can really get the better of them. So this is a tough test. I think TCU is really going to air it out. You have a guy in Quentin Johnson who, you're probably sticking Keely Ringo on. That's a pretty good matchup, but Marvin Harrison was cooking Keely Ringo last week for the most part. And then on the other side, you have Malachi Starks, very talented, but just a true freshman. So yeah, there's a lot that could go wrong if TCU gets some momentum here as it pertains to Georgia. So they're going to need to be buttoned up in the secondary. The parallel that I draw is a little bit like Georgia being shell-shocked by Alabama's passing game in the SEC championship game last year, and then coming out with a totally different game plan for the Natty to kind of hem it in a little bit more. I wonder if we'll see a similar type of adjustment. They have obviously a lot less time to make those adjustments stick, but they need to do something different as far as the secondary is concerned. But if TCU doesn't make those big plays, I think Georgia wins this one pretty easily. I think that it's also a big factor here that TCU's run defense, not very good. Georgia's run offense has been awesome. It's super deep as far as like Kenny McIntosh, Dejan Edwards, Kendall Milton even getting in the mix a little bit last week as well. So that's a deep stable that's going to be tough for TCU to contain all night. But if TCU is working quick strike offense, that we got ourselves a really good game. So I think we're going to be treated to something pretty awesome here on Monday night now out in Los Angeles. And, I'm very excited for it. I'm very nervous, of course. In my heart of hearts, I believe that Georgia will win, but I don't think it's going to be easy or romping or anything like that. TCU playing with an unbelievable amount of confidence right now. And, I'm sure there's a big why not us type of feeling about them playing, Giant Slayer.
Yeah, there is still kind of this like, wait, oh yeah, they're not in the Mountain West anymore feel with TCU. Like this is not really like a Cinderella story by any means. And, talent wise, nobody really measures up to Georgia and Alabama, but TCU is not that far behind. And that's part of the reason I was surprised this line opened so high. Any reservations that you have about the Dogs? Is it, or about this game specifically, I should say, is it more about the Dogs almost tripping up against Ohio State, or is it how good TCU's offense looked against Michigan? Like what kind of scares you more? Is it more the potential letdown for Georgia, or just that TCU, the way that they were able to put up 51 on Michigan? Like, I mean, it's not crazy that they beat Michigan, but I think the way they did it, that's probably what turned the more heads.
Yeah, exactly. Like, basically hitting the total for the game by themselves on
Right.
Michigan, like that's insane. And that's again, even with Dugan throwing a couple of interceptions in there, McCarthy, for his part, tons of yardage, but a couple of killer interceptions in there. Georgia didn't really cause any turnovers last week, so I wonder if that corrects what either it's by their own scheming or if Dugan, continues to have a little bit of turnover trouble here late in the season. But yeah, my reservation for Georgia for this game is, the big kind of sore spot from last week is the secondary. I think teams are just so not interested in even trying to establish the run on Georgia, so they go with kind of this gung ho approach where they just test the secondary, and if something sticks, it ends up being a big play as opposed to like, oh, our run game worked and we gained 5 yards. Like, this could be a Quentin Johnson house call by comparison. So the big play element, that being able to stop TCU in the red zone, I think those are my big concerns. I know it's weird to like be talking about Georgia and say that the defense is the concerning part of it, but after last week and having to go against a quality guy like Max Duggan, going up against Quentin Johnson, going up against the fastest player in college football and Darius Davis, you got to be a little bit scared that the TCU is going to be able to keep it rolling as far as the offense goes. And I think that Georgia's able to keep up offensively for their part. But, if the defense just keeps letting down over and over and over again, and Duggan is extending drives with his legs, if it's not there through the air, then Georgia's in trouble.
100%, dude. So what is your ultimate score prediction here? I'm going to put you on the spot. I know you weren't prepared for this, but give me the final result, final score, and then an over under on number of beverages consumed before kickoff.
Okay, so give me Georgia 38, TCU 28.
Okay.
So a fairly high scoring game that I think, would go over in this spot. As far as the before and after, I will be doing the Monkey Knife Fight show from LA early Monday morning, body clock time at least. So that sets me back about an hour as far as pregame preparation goes.
Not necessarily, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can always play catch up, but I think between like the traveling to the game and everything, I think we're going to keep things reasonably in check. I also don't know what the pre-gaming situation looks like relative to like how much time do we need to bake in to actually get to the stadium. Last year we got to the stadium early, even though we were at an establishment that was basically right across the street, but we just kind of all wanted to soak it in. So I envision something similar where we get a good amount of fun going here before the game, get into the stadium, have one or two to calm the nerves, and then it's go time, and you're just focused on the game after that. So I think all told on Monday, by the time I wake up until the time that kickoff happens, set the over under at 5.5.
That seems very low. I will be hammering the over on that one. I'll tell you that. We'll see if we can get BetMGM to post that and make it actually bettable. But best of luck in your travels this weekend.
I almost awesome. Couldn't even get out that number. It was so low.
Yeah, we got a rat line here. It's gonna be off the board pretty soon. But enjoy the trip out there. It's gonna be amazing. I mean, being in the house for the national championship, that is literally every college sports fan's dream. I've lived it for Wisconsin basketball. It was a horrible result. Would not advise going to the national championship and having your team lose. But I think you're going to come out of this one all right. I'm on the Dogs as well.
Okay, let's go Dogs. I needed that from a a neutral perspective. Although maybe I've caused you subconsciously to be biased over the years, but let's go Dogs.
Let's go Dogs. I fully expect some barking Snapchats, around like 8-9 p.m. Central. So make sure you get those sent out.
Oh, dude, yeah, you don't have to worry about that.